going live in 3, 2, 1. And we're live, I think, I hope. Right. Hey, everyone. My name is Alex Live, and you're watching Virtual Jock. Virtual Jock is, of course, the virtual Java user group, which you can join from the comfort of your own home if you don't have a nice Java user group nearby, or if you don't feel like going out and talking to people face-to-face in these challenging times. We try to host technical sessions a few times a month, and we try to, since we are virtual, we have access to absolutely the best speakers in the industry. And today we have a very exciting session with the most excellent speaker that I hope you will all enjoy. Before we start, let me just introduce the Virtual Jock and say a couple of words that I need to do in the beginning, and we quickly go into the session. So just a few slides here. My name is Alex Shalaev, and I work as a developer advocate for the GraalVM project. So you can find me online by @Shalaev. If you have any feedback about Virtual Jock, just send me an email, or I don't know, follow me on GitHub and raise an issue on my personal profile page. I would like to thank Snyk for providing us with the Zoom account for the infrastructure. And Snyk, of course, is the company that does developer tooling about vulnerabilities. So if you're doing open source and you want to check against vulnerabilities, you can look into Snyk or ping Brian there, who is one of the Virtual Jock leaders. We have a Virtual Jock Slack workspace, which you should join. There's a channel called Live Session, which you should use to discuss the session as it goes. And then if you have any questions to the speaker, just use that channel and we will try to forward those to the speaker. And then any feedback is, of course, appreciated. Today's session is an absolute joy. Coding that sparks joy with Quarkus. And our speaker is the one and only Edson Yanaga. You can find him online on Twitter, at least. He goes by @Yanaga, if I'm not mistaken. And this is my absolute pleasure to introduce you, Edson. You please come on stage. Hi, how are you?
Thank you, Oleg. Yeah, I'm good. And how are things going with you? I don't know where you're based. That's why I'm asking.
I am in a rainy Estonia nowadays. It's rainy and it's horrible, and I'm very happy that I'm inside. So I hope you are somewhere in a sunny part of the world right now.
Yeah, I'm streaming straight from Raleigh, North Carolina, but today's not a lucky day because we have a hurricane on top of us right now. So I hope that my internet connection and my power stays alive for the entire duration of the stream.
Yes, that'd be absolutely spectacular. Right. So Edson, the floor is yours. Everyone who's watching, if you are watching the review, the video on YouTube. Sorry, brain melt. Please find Edson and ask all the questions. I'm sure he would be happy to chat with you. And just if you're watching live, please join the Slack channel and tweet and I don't know, post messages on Facebook. Everyone should absolutely learn from this session. Without further ado, Edson, the floor is yours. Please share the screen and I will mute myself and not interrupt you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oleg. Let me try to share my screen here. And yes, if everything went well, you might be seeing my slides. So as Oleg mentioned, yes, okay, awesome. And I'd like to say that I admire a lot the work of the VJug folks. I can see that you were a visionary and you are pioneers in this stuff because, you know, back in the world when, well, we still had like in-person meetups, well, VJug was a pioneer, that meaning that it was virtual. Like we're visionaries because now everybody's virtual, but VJug, of course, has a great mind share, and it's awesome to be here. I always wanted to have the opportunity to present at the VJug, so I was super happy when I was invited to deliver this presentation, and I hope you have the same joy that I'm having today, because today is all about sparking joy with Quarkus. And more fun information about me. I'm a Japanese Brazilian. I was born and raised in Brazil, but all of my grandparents are Japanese. That's why I have this particular face. I'm also a Java champion, Microsoft MVP, and the DevConf Rockstar. And yes, my Twitter is @Yanaga. So if you want to follow me, of course, I talk a lot about Java, DevOps, Microservices, distributed data, cloud, Kubernetes, and Quarkus, which is the subject of today's talk. And actually, you should be following me on Twitter because I know that Java developers, they are very proficient in social media because Java developers, they always have the excuse, yeah, my code is compiling, my Maven build is running, I'm running the tests, I'm waiting for my application server to start, I'm waiting for my application to warm up, and you always have a good excuse to go get some coffee and, well, anything else. And I know it's true because in the past, in some of the projects that I worked with Java in the past, I would have to wait like for 30 minutes to know if anything that I did was correct. Like I would just Maven build, try to stop the application server, copy the artifact, start, wait for it to warm up, send a request, log in, just to check that I made a typo in one of the forms and start it over again. So Java wasn't the most productive development platform in the world in the past. And I know that a lot of the Java jokes in the past were true because Java was super slow, had a super slow feedback loop. And I can understand when Java developers were jealous about JavaScript programmers or Ruby programmers, or maybe not that much, but it's really nice that they would have this very nice feedback loop, like where you just save the file, you just send a request, and everything is automatically there. But these old jokes are not true anymore because Quarkus changes everything. Quarkus is all about developer joy, and Quarkus has a lot of nice, amazing features. But my favorite feature of Quarkus is the one that allows you to have this development mode. If we have development mode, Quarkus is listening for changes in your file system. And whenever you have a change and you send a new request to your browser, Quarkus is going to restart automatically. And Quarkus doesn't restart in a matter of minutes nor seconds. Quarkus restarts in a matter of milliseconds. And actually, in a good day, when I'm not doing live streaming, when I'm using this fancy stuff in OBS here in the background, Quarkus in my machine, it takes approximately 100 milliseconds to restart and to give me the new results. And I've been doing some JavaScript Node.js development in the past few weeks, and I can tell you that after using Quarkus, doing Node.js and JavaScript development is so boring because JavaScript is so slow. Quarkus is so much faster and so much easier to do. But I don't want you to trust whatever I'm saying. I want you to feel it. I want you to see the real magic happening because this session is a live coding one, and we're going to try to spark some joy. So now I'm going to go back here to my screen, and I hope you can see my browser now. And when you're seeing, this is your new favorite website on the internet, quarkus.io. And if you want to start the joy, you can just go here under your top right corner. You can click on the Start Coding button. I'm going to click it. It's going to redirect you to the Quarkus generator. And the only boring part is that I have to type this group ID, artifact ID, which are required by Maven and Gradle. So I'm going to type com Red Hat developers. And the artifact is going to be vjug, because yes, I love being here in the vjug. And I'm going to pick just one extension. Think about Quarkus extension as Quarkus capabilities that allows you to be super fast and super small running in production. And since I want to test a very small REST endpoint, I'm just going to add the JAX extension and we should be good. If I go here to the generate your application button, you can see that I can download as a zip file, or I can even directly push to GitHub. Now, since I want to do something local, let me try to save this local zip file. And now we're going to go back here to my terminal. Just in case my font is too small, just tell me, I'll be able to increase it. But I believe it's good enough. So what we're going to do, we're going to unzip the file that I just downloaded. It's going to be vjug.zip. So we're going back here to the folder. And now I'm going to open my new favorite IDE these days, which is Visual Studio Code for Java with the Quarkus extension and the Java extension provided by Red Hat. But of course, Quarkus works super well with any IDE. If you are an IDEA user, just like me, I use both VS Code and IDEA. IDEA also has a Quarkus extension. So you should be covered no matter what IDE you choose to do. And I know that we have a lot of IDEA fans. Well, I use both, to be very honest. But today, I decided to use VS Code. So what do we have here? If I go back here to my to my Java folder. You can see that Quarkus automatically created an example REST endpoint. So you can see it's going to be returning hello. So let's start the magic. I'm going to go back here to my browser and say, and type the magic words, mvn Quarkus :dev. What is happening right now is Quarkus is compiling the project, so regular Maven build, and Quarkus is going to bootstrap in development mode. And once we're finished with development mode, we can just go back here to my browser and type localhost 8080/rest easy /hello. And you can see that the reply is automatically there. But since we're using development mode, I can just go back here to VS Code and let's say, instead of just hello, let's try hello, vjug. And I just save the file, go back to my browser, refresh, and everything is automatically there. And how long did Quarkus take to restart? Quarkus this time restarted my application server in approximately 700 milliseconds, but it's not good enough. But remember, I'm doing some live stream today and my CPU is a bit overwhelmed. So, but in your daily using machine, it should be much faster. As I said, for me, it takes at most 150 milliseconds every time. And the more you use development mode, the faster Quarkus gets because, well, the JVM is still warming up. Okay, what else can we do here with our code? Well, this is just a plain old static string, like a synchronous REST endpoint. What else can we do? We could maybe configure this endpoint to read from a property. So if I want to provide a runtime property, I can say config property. Let's try to name it a greeting. And I'm going to say string greeting. And instead of returning this static string, like this constant string, I can say greeting. I save the file, go back here to my browser, refresh, and I have an error. And Quarkus has a very nice error message. If you go through the stack trace, you see, well, you asked for a configuration property, but you didn't provide any configuration property. That's why we have a bug. And you know, if you ever used it to, well, I'm pretty sure you did, to scroll through stack traces, oh, you have to read a lot just to know that the meaningful message is always the last one. So with Quarkus, we tried a different approach. When you're using development mode, we always invert the stack traces. So the root cause is always on the top. So you can see, yeah, there's no config value for property greeting. How do we fix that? Remember, I didn't stop Quarkus yet. Quarkus is still running. How do I fix that? I open my application properties file, and I can type a property saying greeting equals to, let's try to add some Brazilian Portuguese, because I'm Brazilian. To say hola, which is the same in Spanish, by the way. I just save the file, go back here to my browser, refresh, and it's automatically there. How long Quarkus it take this time? 180 milliseconds. So yes, we're doing better, 0.1 seconds. Did you ever wonder the day where your Java application will be able to do that in just 0.1 seconds? Me neither, but thanks to Quarkus, this day has arrived, and I'm sparking joy because this day has arrived. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I don't know how many of you know Maria Kondo, but of course I stole spark joy from her, and yeah, because Quarkus for me is all about sparking joy, and I know that Quarkus will spark joy for you too. So what else can we do? And of course, since I'm using Java 8+, I'm not constrained to basic types. I can use an optional, Java optional if I type it correctly, of course. Optional, and I can say greeting, like, or else. Let's try to add some French, or else bonjour. So I just save the file, go back here to my browser, and refresh. It's still allowed because I did provide a property, but just in case I didn't, suppose I made a typo. Let's say greeting 2, save the file, go back here, refresh, and I'll have bonjour. Of course, Quarkus can do synchronous and asynchronous REST endpoints. So just by saying, like, I want to get, I want to produce, let's try to copy paste this one just for the sake of productivity. I'm going to add another path /async, and I can say, well, completion stage of type string, hello async, and I can return, for example, a completable future, supply async, and I'm going to say hello. Async, okay? And if I did everything correctly, I save the file, go back here to my browser, and try to access this async endpoint. And again, I have an error. you can see that Quarkus tried to compile my project, but I made a mistake. And you can see that you have a very clear error message while developing. Example resource, line 30, you have a, well, I was expecting a semicolon. Let's try to fix that. I'll go back here to my IDE. And actually, I had an additional closing parenthesis. I just saved this file and go back here to my browser. And yes, hello, I'm Async. And Quarkus, as you can see, was super fast in performing these particular changes. What else can we do? You might be arguing that, well, Quarkus is only this super fast because it's just a plain old REST endpoint. And no enterprise application is enterprising enough if you don't add a database. So let's try to do that. So what are the features that Quarkus can provide to us? Oh, and if you're thinking about reactive programming and reactive endpoints, yes, Quarkus has it covered. I don't have time to cover this particular subject with you today, but if we have another opportunity at the VJUG, I'll be more than happy to talk about the latest Quarkus APIs, the new reactive APIs, the possibility for you to be using reactive database drivers, and guess what? Hibernate reactive. So if you're a JPN fan, if you want to map your JPN entities to your database and still be reactive, now you can because of Quarkus. So stay tuned. I would love to share with you in another opportunity. But let's try to add a database for our traditional application today. So for us to add new capabilities to our Quarkus application, I need to add more extensions. And what are extensions? They are just plain old Maven dependencies or Gradle dependencies, just libraries that you add to your pom.xml. But since I'm using VS Code, I have the plugin has a very nice feature, which is an action like Quarkus add extensions to your current project. So I just type here, I just type the extensions, and it's going to be added automatically to my project. So right now I have a MariaDB database running here. So let's I try add the MariaDB JDBC driver. I also want to use some Hibernate, but not just Hibernate. Hibernate with Panache, which is a new way for you to a new persistent style for your entities. I also want to provide some REST easy with JSONB because I want to return just JSON REST endpoints. I also want to test this and document my endpoints. So I'm going to add some small RAI Open API, and we should be good. Let's start to add some validation too. I'm going to add a Hibernate validator and 5 extensions. I hope we're good. And type enter. And you can see that this VS Code plugin is just calling Maven with our command line. And this Maven plugin is going to add these dependencies to my project. So you can see here, emojis for the wing, everything green. And if I open my pom.xml file, you can see that these dependencies were added here to my project. Yeah, JSONB, OpenAPI, MariaDB, and that's all we need. So what are we going to do? Let's start with a new file called developer. I'm going to create a new entity called developer.java. It's a class. So if I want to provide an entity at entity, and let's say, you would say every entity should have an ID. So we would have to type very boring public long ID, at generated value. But since I'm using Quarkus, I want to show you the new way for you to do persistent entities. So we're going to extend Panache entity. And with Panache entity, I don't have to type the ID because this property is inherited from a Panache entity. And I just want to say every developer should have a private string name. And I would probably have to type to generate the borings, getter and the setters, get name, set name. But think about it again. If you're creating private fields and exposing everything as public getters and setters, you don't have true encapsulation because you're already exposing the internal state of your entity. So maybe, and I know it's very opinionated and we have mixed reaction about it. So maybe if we can switch this private field and public getters and setters and use a public field instead. So, and you know, it might be a bit awkward. Oh, you're not using encapsulation, but this is only at build time. Because at build time, Quarkus is making this field private and is generating the getters and setters. So with Quarkus, you can code like a public field, but it will run like a private property. So you have the best of both worlds. And remember, this is completely optional. With Panache, what we're trying to do is trying to enable a new persistent style that in the past in the Java world was super hard or even impossible, depending on the platform that you were using. So if you came from the Ruby on Rails world, you know that Ruby on Rails, they don't use repositories like in the Java world. They're used to active record style persistent. And active record style is a persistent style where you mix your entity with your persistent methods. So you don't have to have another component like a repository where you say, oh, repository.save, repository.find. All of these finder and saver methods are embedded into your entity. So it is much more productive if your domain model is simple. If you have a more complex domain model, you might want to use a repository. But luckily, with Quarkus, we have both. So let's stick with just developer name for now. So if I want to try that, I want to expose it with REST endpoint. So we're going to create a developer resource. And developer resource, the path is going to be /developer. And I'm going to generate a get endpoint. It's going to produce media type dot JSON, application JSON, and I'm going to public, oops, if I type it correctly, public list. I'm going to return a lot of developers, developer and developers. And here I don't have to inject a repository or an entity manager, no, nothing. If I want to retrieve all of the developers in my database, I just want, don't do this at production, please. Return developer dot, remember, active record style list all, and should be able to return. And I think, yes, I imported the wrong producers. So if I do import the right one, JAX, yes. So that's all that I need to retrieve all developers in my database. The only thing missing here is that we didn't configure the database access. So how do I do that? I can go here to my application properties and say, well, I can say I have a template here. So it's going to be a MariaDB. The username is going to be Sparks Joy. The password is SparkJoy2. The URL, localhost, MariaDB, SparkJoy, and born JDBC. And I want Quarkus to hibernate database generation. It's going to be true updates because I want Quarkus to create the schema on the fly for me, because this is just a demo, of course, never do this in production, kids. And I think we're good. Remember, I didn't restart Quarkus yet. Quarkus is still working in development mode here and is listening for the changes. You can see that I changed the font.xml. You already downloaded all of my dependencies. It's still running. And I want to show you because here on the other tab, I have a MariaDB database running. If I show the tables, it's completely empty. So let the magic happen. If I go back here, let's try to hit my endpoint /developer. So Quarkus is connected to my database, created the database schema, and retrieved all of the developers on the database, which is returning an empty JSON array because, well, the database is empty. Let's see if you created tables. So show tables. Yes. Try to describe the developer table. You can see that I already have an ID and I already have a name. How do I know if my REST endpoint is working? Well, I could do boring insert statements here, but I know that the best way for me to test my REST endpoint is by using another REST endpoint. So let's try to create a post REST endpoint too. I'm going to go back here to my IDE, and in my example resource, developer resource, I'm going to create now at post endpoint. I'm going to copy paste this produces. It's going to consume some JSON too. And this one is going to be return a response, new developer, and the magic happens again. No need for an entity manager. Let me import the right one here. So if I want to make sure that this developer will be persisted, I just have to make sure that the developer ID is going to be null. And here, magic, developer.persist. And that's it. I just can return, for example, response that status status.created. And let me try to help here. I'm going to return an entity. This entity is going to be the newly generated developer. And let's view this particular response. What did I miss? Well, I need a transaction to be able to persist this one. So I'm going to add this particular transactional annotation, save the file, and we should be good. How do I test this post REST endpoint? If you're thinking about curl, yes, but it's just boring. I could be using a Firefox plugin called Postman too, but I want to try it the other way. So let's go back here to my browser. And since we added the OpenAPI extension, Quarkus is already documenting all the REST endpoints that we have in our application. And when you're running development mode, you also have another endpoint called Swagger UI. So in development mode, you have this very nice endpoint Swagger, which shows you all the REST endpoints, and you can test all of them too. So I'm interested in this post endpoint. If I click on the button on the right, try it out, it's going to allow me to try this endpoint. So I'm going to add some developers here. So I'm going to try one. Let's try to add Yanaga because I'm a developer. I execute that, and you can see there, yes, I have a 201 response, which is the right one. ID 1 and Yanaga. Let's try to add more developers. I'm going to try to add Oleg because he's a developer too. I know that. Yeah, Oleg. Let's try to add Simon because I know he's one of the founding members of the BJAG. I'm going to add some Simon here, and yes, it's persisted. And I'm going to try to add Burr because he's my boss, and just in case he's watching the session, I think he's not. But yeah, just in case somebody asks, he was here. So now I have 4 developers persisted in my database. And let's try to refresh here my REST endpoint on Firefox and see if it's retrieving. Yes, it's retrieving. Yanaga, Oleg, Simon, and Burr are already here on this presentation because my REST endpoint is working correctly. And what else can we do? We can also try to do here, developer, let's try to add another property here with Quarkus. And every developer these days has a favorite framework. So I'm going to type public string favorite framework. And since it's just JPA, I can add, for example, this column annotation. And I can add a column definition. Could be, yes, it's going to be varchar 255. And the default one is going to be everybody's favorite framework these days, which is Quarkus. And I just save the file, go back here to my browser, refresh, and you can see that, yes, everybody's favorite framework these days is already Quarkus. And remember that I said that Quarkus generates like, you code like a public field, but you run like a private property. If you want to provide your own getters and setters, Quarkus will use the getters and setters that you coded, of course. So let's try to add a new requirement here. I suppose that now all of the developer names should be uppercase. So if I create a getter, get name, and I change it, say, to uppercase. I save the file, go back here to my browser and refresh. You can see that all developer names now are uppercase. And if I change it for get favorite framework, I can say, let's change it to lowercase. And your favorite framework will be in lowercase. I save the file, go back here, refresh, and you can see that everybody's favorite framework these days is going to be lowercase. Amazing, isn't it? I think it is. Oh, we can add some validation. Let's see. I want the minimum length of the name to be 3, which means that if I try to persist something, developer with a name which is like lesser than 3, I will have a validation error. And Quarkus has everything integrated in the chain. So if I want this validation error message to be propagated to the UI, all I have to do is go back here to my REST endpoint and add an annotation at valid on my developer that is being received as a parameter here. So yes, we should be good. Go back here to the browser. Let's try this Swagger UI. So let's try to persist me, which is only 2. I'll have an error. If I try to execute that, and remember, Quarkus is restarting the application, recompiling and restarting behind the scenes. And you can see that, well, I have a 400 error, bad request, which is a right error message, error code, if you have a validation error, and saying, well, parameter, new developer, developer.name must be greater than or equal to 3. So we have this very nice error message. Everything working super smoothly. What else can we do? Well, you might be also thinking, yeah, I really like this Quarkus thing to be super fast, super sonic, super atomic, super small and super fast to develop, super run into production. But I'm a Spring developer, and I can understand you because I'm a Spring developer too. I've been using Spring since 1.0 beta 2, so it has been quite some years since I'm using Spring, and I dedicated my entire career to developing Spring framework applications. So the first thought that I have in my mind is, can I reuse my existing Spring skills, like my knowledge of the Spring APIs, but yet still be supersonic and subatomic using Quarkus? And luckily for us, the answer is yes, you can. So let me try to enhance my project here. Of course, I'm going to add more extensions to the project. And I'm going to add here, well, I want to use Spring Web because I want to use Spring WebMVC to create REST endpoints. I also want to use Spring Data. And yes, we support Spring Security, Spring Cache, and other APIs. But let's start with just these three ones. So I hit Enter. So I'm just adding new dependencies to my pwn.xml, but in an automated way through the plugin. And we should be good. Yeah, I open my pwn. Yeah, Spring Web and Spring Data are already here. And what can we do? Well, let's try to create a REST controller, Spring REST controller. And I can say developer controller .java. So I create this one, and I can say add REST controller, and I can do what else? Request mapping. If I type correctly, of course, request mapping, and it's going to be Spring-developer. And okay, let's try to return all developers in the database again. Public list, developer, and developers. And this one is going to be a get mapping. And I could do it the Panache way. For example, return developer dot list all. It will work out of box. And actually, you can try. I just save this file here, go back here. And remember, I added dependencies to my phone. Didn't restart Quarkus yet. Quarkus detected the change, and everything will feel like magic. Everything is super fast, super productive. So if I type Spring dash developer, and I have a runtime error saying, well, what is here? Error package bind does not exist. Okay. Yes, and it happens sometimes. Well, when you're restarting and adding new dependencies, sometimes it happens. But for me, usually I just have to stop Quarkus and start it over again, because sometimes you have some mess running behind the scenes. I just restart, but luckily, even when I'm restarting, it's super fast. So I just go back here and send a new request to my browser and waiting for it to start. And yes, it always takes longer when you're live streaming with OBS and a green screen background. So let's refresh. And yes, my Spring developer endpoint now it's working perfectly. But you don't want to use Panache. So suppose it's too opinionated. And remember, Panache allows you to create repositories too. I don't know if I'll have time today, but we can try. But you, I suppose you also love Spring Data. Spring Data is one of my favorite Spring APIs. And luckily, Quarkus supports Spring Data APIs too. So let me try to create a Spring developer repository. .java, and you were going to create an interface, which is going to extend JPA repository from developer and log. Okay, and we can even add like custom methods. I can say, well, public list developer, find by name, and then type a string name. And it should be good. So yes, you just create this Spring Data repository, and it should be good enough for Quarkus. I can just go back here and say Spring developer repository, developer. And I can use @inject. And just in case you're asking, yes, constructor injection works. I'm just too lazy to do it today. And instead of return developer.listAll, I can say developer repository .find all. And I save the file. Let's go back here to my browser, refresh, and everything is still working. Everything is working as expected. So let me try to use this finder method. Let's say I want to add a request parameter here. And this requested parameter is going to be Brazilian. Okay, and Boolean Brazilian. And I can say, well, if I want to find the Brazilians here on the repository persisted in my database, I can say, well, return the developer repository, find by name, and it should be returning only the Yanaga ones. Okay, save the file, go back here to my browser, and let's try to add this parameter. It's going to be Brazilian equals to true. I type here, and it's only returning myself. If I remove this parameter, yes, it's returning everybody. And just for me to be able to show how you can create Spring Data repositories, and you can use in JAX-RS controllers, or the opposite is also true. But just for the sake of completeness, let me try to create a Panache repository too. So I'm going to create a developer repository. And this case is going to be a class. And this one is going to extend Panache repository. Panache. Oh, no, you got me. Did I forgot to extend? Oh, no, that's fine. Implement, that's an interface. Panache repository and Panache repository of developer. Okay, and this being is going to be application scoped. And that's it. We have all the persistent methods. If I want to create a custom query methods, I can do that too. So let's try to public list string find by name. Let's try to do the same thing, string name. Return, I can say find, and I can say name. If you this is accepting JPQL, but if you're from developer d where d.name equals to something, well, with Panache, just try the property name. You can say name equals to something, and you say, well, let's use the name. And you might be comparing a dot list. You might be comparing return find dot lists. Oh, it's not list of strings, list of developers. Okay, you might be comparing this to the Spring approach. From my experience, here's a Spring Data, very simple, complex, very simple query logic. Maybe Spring Data find by this, find by that, it's better. If we have a more complex query, more complex business logic, I know that typing this with Panache, for me, it seems like more like a natural approach. But again, you can use both. We're not judging. You can be supersonic and subatomic, super fast, super small in production with both options. And let me try to change the developer resource here. So I'm just going to add a query parameter, and it's going to be Brazilian again. Boolean Brazilian. And if Brazilian, then I'm going to use my repository. And here I can use @inject, developer repository. Developer repository, and return repository find by name is going to be Yanaga. Here I can use the same here. Return developer repository find all. Okay, now I'm using repositories instead of active record style. I just save it. I can go back here to developer. Brazilian equals to true, and a query, I have an error. Compilation error finds all incompatible types. I can't Panache query, and I return, lists. Okay, and well, and since because Quarkus has very nice error messages, I just read it, I save the file, refresh, and everything is automatically there. Let's try to show you another feature. So what I can do right now, let's try to open, not open. I'm going to stop Quarkus for a moment because I want to create a new project here. So let's see if I have an old one here. So another way for you to create a Quarkus project by using the Maven plugin. So IO Quarkus Maven plugin, the latest version, which was released today or yesterday. Quarkus is evolving super fast. 191 final, and let's try to add final. Great. So I'm invoking the Maven plugin. It's downloading because it's super new. Come Red Hat developers, and I'm going to call it remote. Project version, okay. I'm going to create a REST resource. Yes, please. A name, okay. Path hello. So what we have here, I just created a new project. If I try to package it, Quarkus is going to build my executable jar, and also Quarkus. But when you create a REST endpoint, Quarkus already integrates with Rest Assured for integration testing. So yes, it's going to run the test. So that's why you're seeing a test running here. But because Quarkus runs so fast, integration tests are super fast too, and is successful. If I go here to my target folder, you can see that what we have here, we have a remote runner. So my executable jar, let me try to see the size. My executable jar is consuming only 200 kilobytes of disk space. And let's see if it runs java-jar remote runner. And it started already. And if I go localhost 8080, yes, my new cloud native application is running. So let's stop it. And you mean that your Quarkus application is only consuming 200 kilobytes of disk space? Well, a bit more. You can see if you take a better look, you can see that in the target folder, we have a lib folder. And if I look at the lib folder, you can see that in the lib folder, there are all of the dependencies that Quarkus uses in production for this particular project. But how big is this lib folder? This lib folder is only 11 megabytes of disk size. So Quarkus applications are very small, and of course, they will consume it's very tiny amount of memory, and in production is going to start super fast too. And we did that by default because Quarkus was created for this new cloud first, Kubernetes first, container first world. So it doesn't make sense for you to be packaging fat jars over and over again when all that is changing between your releases is just your business logic. So you're repackaging your dependencies, which don't change every time, even though it's like always the same. So with Quarkus, we add the dependencies a separate lib folder, so you can, when curating a container, you can add this lib in a separate layer, in a layer like below to be properly cached. And you're only changing with every single container release, you're only changing your proper business logic. That's how it works. And of course, you might have heard of it. I'm pretty sure that Oleg knows about it. You might have heard about a new technology called GraalVM. And GraalVM, one of the features of GraalVM is that allows you to create what we call native images, native binary images that run native on your operating system. So here, today I'm running on a Mac, so it's going to be running oops. It's going to be creating a Mac native executable. But with Quarkus, if you want to create a native binary image for Linux that will run inside a container, with Quarkus, we already have a parameter for that. So if I want to create a native image, all I have to do is to enable the native profile. So I enable the native profile, Quarkus is going to integrate with GraalVM, and it's going to generate a native image. And this process might take some time. In my machine, it takes almost a minute, like 50-something seconds on a good day. But today I'm streaming, and with OBS, I don't know how long it's going to take. And while my code is compiling, I can show you more features about Quarkus. So let me try to compare this container-first approach. In the past, it made sense for Java to consume lots of memory and to take a lot of time to warm up, because you would start your Java application server and you would leave it running for 6 months. But in this new cloud-native world, container-first world, Kubernetes native world, yeah, you don't want to scale your applications up. You want to have horizontal scaling, so you want more instances running at the same time, because of availability, and also because when you want to spike up the number of instances when you have a lot of requests coming, and you also want to cut down the number of instances that you have running in production when you don't have that many requests, because you also want to save money. That's the new cloud native approach. And Java wasn't a good fit because, again, Java used to consume a lot of memory and take a lot of time to warm up. Sometimes you would have your container, well, it would take forever to boot and reply to the first request, and another time to warm up. Then the requests are gone. Your users would have errors already. They would have moved to your competitor. But with Quarkus, we changed everything. So I'm going to show you some numbers of how fast and how small Quarkus can be in production. So let me show here. So let's try to move here. I have some pictures. So if you create a REST endpoint with Quarkus, let's see how much memory is Quarkus consuming in production. If you create a native image with Quarkus and GraalVM, Quarkus is going to take only 13 megabytes of RAM. If you run Quarkus with OpenJDK, it's going to consume 74 megabytes of RAM, and your traditional cloud-native stack is going to consume at least 140 megabytes of RAM. That's how small Quarkus can be when running either in OpenJDK or GraalVM. So depending on your workload, Quarkus can be 10 times smaller regarding memory, or can be 2 times smaller in production regarding memory consumption. Let's try to add some JPA to the equation. So if I add JPA to the equation, if I add the database, Quarkus plus GraalVM is going to consume 35 megabytes of RAM. Quarkus on OpenJDK is going to consume only 130 megabytes of RAM. And your traditional cloud-native stack is going to consume at least 218 megabytes of RAM. So Quarkus is super small in production. Doesn't matter which scenario do you choose. Let's talk about boot plus first response time. So we don't measure boot time because some other frameworks might use everything as lazy. So it just shows a small number. But when you send a first request, it takes like much more to process, to initialize, to warm up, to process, and to reply. So we measure the total time from boot until we have a first successful response. So if you're using Quarkus plus GraalVM, you're going to have the first response in only 13 milliseconds. Did you ever wonder the day where a Java application would start, boot, initialize, process, and reply to the first request in only 13 milliseconds? Me neither, but thanks to Quarkus, this day has arrived. Quarkus and GraalVM, of course, too. So if you add OpenJDK, it's going to take 750 milliseconds, and your traditional cloud-native stack is going to take at least 4.3 seconds. Add JPA to the equation. Quarkus plus GraalVM is going to take 55 milliseconds. Quarkus on OpenJDK is going to take 2.5 seconds. And your traditional cloud-native stack is going to take so long that I had to scroll the picture because it's going to take at least 9.5 seconds. That's how fast and how small Quarkus can be when running in production. So while I did this presentation, very likely, yes, my build finished. Today took 2 minutes. Yes, my CPU is overwhelmed. So if I look here at the target folder, you'll be able to see that now I have this runner, which is an executable file here, native for Mac. Let's try to run this application. Runner, and since it's Java, I can pass some parameters. So let me try to run with a heap size of 6. 6 megabytes of RAM. Let's try to run it. Yes, fire allow. Yes, it's running. It started today in 38 milliseconds, so it's slow today. Usually when I'm not streaming, it takes approximately 8 or 7 milliseconds, 38 milliseconds. And let's see if it's working. Localhost 8080. Yes, my new cloud native application is working. And let's see how much memory it's consuming. I have an alias here, which allows us to compute the total resident set size and grep run it. So my Quarkus application is taking only 23 megabytes of total resident set size. So it's not only heap size, we're computing heap size, out of heap memory, threads, stacks, and all of this. It's computing this 23 megabytes of RAM. That's how small and how amazing Quarkus can be into production too. So I think I was able to show most of the things that I wanted to do. And of course, Quarkus is ready for this cloud native world. The last feature that I might be able to show you, I won't be able to deploy to Kubernetes today. I think we don't have the time. But if I decide to add another extension here, Quarkus, add extensions equals to Kubernetes. Let me try to add the Kubernetes extension because nobody wants to be typing YAML. And well, can I use Quarkus to generate my Kubernetes YAML file so I can deploy that easily too? Can Quarkus generate containers for me easily too? Yes, you can do a Docker build because if you go here to the source main Docker folder, we already have optimized the Docker files for you. But if you don't want to mess with Docker files, you can add the Docker extension or the Jib extension or the OpenShift extension that allows you to create containers without using Docker files. Quarkus does everything automatically for you, creates a very secure, very optimized container image without you having to hassle with the internals of Docker files. But I added the Kubernetes extension. Let me try to package the file, package the project again. Let's generate the artifacts. And we are waiting for the test to run. It's going to finish. And let's see. So it takes forever when we're waiting and live streaming. Using a thin jar, and yes. So since I added the Kubernetes extension, I can target Kubernetes YAML file. I have the Kubernetes YAML file, which is just boring. Nobody should be typing YAML manually. It should be generated by a machine. You can see you have all of the dependencies. And of course, if you had health checks, liveness probes, readiness probes, if you had resources and limits on your Quarkus application, these endpoints will be automatically configured on your Kubernetes YAML file. So you don't have to worry about YAML files anymore because Quarkus is going to generate everything automatic for you. And if I were to deploy this thing into production, I would just have to type kubectl apply-f target kubernetes.yaml file, and the magic would happen automatically for me. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to share with you because I wanted to save some time for questions. I know that sometimes people want to ask questions and know more about Quarkus, specific things about Quarkus. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And I don't know, Oleg, if we have any questions on the chat, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Edson. This was excellent. This was so smooth that there were comments about how someone loves IntelliJ IDEA, but they feel the urgent need to download and learn Visual Studio Code just to mimic everything they see here, right? So that's the highest form of compliment I think a speaker can receive, even though it's not directly about the content of the presentation. Yes, of course we have a bunch of questions, both in the Slack workspace and in the YouTube chat as well. So let me start. And I know that there's not a lot of time, so I will try to skip the more philosophical questions and we'll try to go with more technical runs. So a quick question is the first by Saif. What benchmark did you use to generate those numbers on the homepage of Quarkus?
We have, here at Red Hat, we have a team dedicated to do performance tests. So they have a very controlled environment. They have machines, different CPUs for everything, different switches for load and for the testing. So yes, so this team produces these numbers. They have a test suite, which is not publicly available because we don't want to disclose the names of everything that we're testing. But if you want to know more how they did that, the performance engineers are available on the Quarkus mailing list. So if you go to the Quarkus website and join on the mailing list, they will be more than happy to provide you how they perform the test. So maybe you can even try to reproduce them.
Excellent, excellent. One of the initial questions that we had as well, if there are teams in your company, I guess, or in the project that are using Spring Boot or Micronaut, why would your particular team switch to Quarkus? And do you have a comparison for Micronaut versus Quarkus? That's by the same person, so I merged them.
Yeah, no, these are all great projects. And I see it's very nice that the Java ecosystem has this project, these frameworks, platforms to be working with. I would say that with Quarkus, we have a very nice community. Quarkus is only 2 years old, for example. Internally, the project Red Hat is older. It's like almost 3 or 4 years old, but the source code was publicly available in the past 2 years, and it evolved a lot. We've seen a lot of customers running Quarkus into production, and you can see some very nice use cases that people published on the internet. For example, Vodafone, I think Carrefour, or they just published it, they switched it from Spring applications to Quarkus, and they were able to save their cloud computing bill to lower it by half, because Quarkus is consuming like half the memory for the same workload. So these are very nice use cases. So I would say that you should try and see if Quarkus has the features that you need. If you really like the Kubernetes native features, the small memory footprint and fast boot up, or the amazing development mode, I can see a lot of passion in the arguments. And of course, I love all of these frameworks. Today, my favorite is Quarkus because that's the one I've been using the most. And I can understand that if you try, maybe you'll be able to find some reasons to do that for yourself. But I always ask people, well, have an open mind. I'm a hardcore Spring fan, but I took a try with Quarkus. And to be honest, I fell in love with it. So I think it's worth trying. I would never start a framework wars because I think that each one of them has a particular nice use case. I would just like to point out that the goal of the session is that, well, there is Quarkus. We have some amazing features, and try for yourself and, well, have your own opinion.
Excellent. I am very personally very happy about that position. I think we need more synergy in the ecosystem, and less pointing fingers and saying, aha, you're using like 2 more megabytes of RAM. That is ridiculous. Right. So there was one more technical question. I think you can maybe have time for that. Please, can you tell us what the web server is being used under the hood by Quarkus? So the web server, and what would you suggest if we need the Java app without the web server? So like a command line application, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Quarkus. Okay, I will reply to the first part first. Web server. Quarkus is all of the web layer of Quarkus is using Vertex. So Vertex is probably the most performant web framework that we have, and Vertex uses Netty behind the scenes too. So it's really performant. It's a reactive framework. So everything that runs on the web layer inside Quarkus is running on top of Vertex. And I don't know if it was pushed to, I think it's on Quarkus Master 2. I don't know if it was released already. We have the entire REST layer of Quarkus was rewritten to take benefit of all of the Vertex internals. So Quarkus is already super fast, but you can expect Quarkus to be even faster and with more throughput in the upcoming release, which is about to be in next week or in 2 weeks, because we've rewritten everything which was still JAX-RS with REST Easy. Now we don't have this JAX-RS REST Easy layer anymore. Everything is running natively on top of Vertex, so you can expect it to be much faster. And just in case you're developing a CLI application or something that doesn't use a web server, Quarkus has an extension which allows you to create command line applications. And because of this blended, these features of Quarkus to be super fast and super small, and with GraalVM, we have seen a lot of interest in developing these CLI applications. And some people already develop it, other people already developing, even Kubernetes operators using Java and Quarkus. And Kubernetes is something almost everybody is using Go, but because of Quarkus and GraalVM and Quarkus command modes, people are starting to use Quarkus, Java and Quarkus and GraalVM to create Kubernetes operators.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. And I love how there are more opportunities for Java nowadays than before. Right. Thank you very much. I know that time is a concern here and you have a hard stop. Thank you very much for a very insightful session, Edson. It was a pleasure to have you here. And if you ever would like to return, I would love to be your host again. Thank you very much for watching. If you are watching this on YouTube, please share the video, like and subscribe, and do everything that you need to do on YouTube. And stay tuned for the next upcoming presentations on Virtual Jug. Thank you very much.
Thank you.